Welcome to the ServiceLedger software training series. This particular class is going to talk about job expenses and expense reporting in ServiceLedger. Inside of ServiceLedger, the very first thing you're going to need to do to set up any job expenses for any resource is defining the technician. So you'll set up the resource records in ServiceLedger. As you may or may not be aware, ServiceLedger allows you to track 3 different resources. Only 2 pertains to this particular class, and that's going to be your technicians and or subcontractors. So you can do not only your job expenses for your technicians, but you can also do job expenses for contractors where the contractors are going to be seeking reimbursement. Now, in most cases, subcontractors are going to actually be seeking their reimbursements through the invoices that they submit to you, so that may not be necessary, but in some rare situations, you may actually be paying for subcontractor expense reimbursement, and you need to keep that separate from their bills for the actual work that they're submitting. So depending upon your organization, you have a couple different options there. But assuming you have the technicians already defined in ServiceLedger, we're going to select a particular technician. In this case, we're going to take Charles, and we're going to go in and create a couple job expenses for him. The process of creating the expenses is very simple in ServiceLedger. All we're going to do is select a couple of your active jobs that you have. So let's just go into ServiceLedger and select a couple active jobs. And on each job, you can have a job expense tab. At this point, I can go in and I can enter in my job expenses. So from the job expense tab, I'm going to add an expense to this job. I'm going to give it a description. So let's just give it a description. Maybe we bought something from Lowe's here. I'm going to go ahead and put in my expense amount. And in addition to entering in the job expense, you can invoice it out to the customer if you want to invoice that expense out to the customer. And additionally, and most importantly, if you're going to do reimbursement of that expense to the resource, then you're going to want to hit the reimburse resource checkbox here. And then what we're going to do is we're entering in the expense for Charles. So I'm going to go ahead and select Charles here. And then I'm going to go in on this job and I'm going to add in an additional expense. Maybe this is travel. And I can put in my travel amount here. And I can repeat the process for everything that Charles did here. So I can do airfare, et cetera, for this particular job. Now these job expenses are only tied to this particular job. So if I had several jobs that I did at one time that I need to seek reimbursement for, I would just close out of that job, go to the next job, click on the expense tab, and add the expense there. So let's just put travel here for 400 and reimburse that to Charles here. And then I just repeat the process for all the jobs that Charles worked on. So go in here, I can select another job, enter in Charles's expense on this job. So additional expense. And let's just say this was $67.53. So I want to reimburse Charles for this one as well. Make sure we have the right Charles in there. And then once you have all your job expenses entered into the job, the next step is you're going to do the processing of the expense report. So let's close out of this and let's click on Batching, Office Management, Batch Expense Posting. This is where I want to take all those expenses and I want to transfer them from the job to an expense report to be submitted for repayment to that particular resource. So batch expense posting will show me all my expenses for a particular individual. And in this case, I want to go ahead and pay them all. So I'm just going to go ahead and select everything. And this resource is all the same resource. So all of this is going to show up on the same expense report. And I'm just going to hit process. And that's going to create the expense report for the items that have not been transferred over to an expense report. Once it's been transferred over to the expense report, this item, if it's checked, it's going to disappear from this list because you no longer need to do anything further with it because the item has now been put onto an expense report for you. So at this point, we're going to go back to company. We're going to click on expense reports. And then if you click down here, you can open it up and I'll have my expense report with all my items that I'm seeking reimbursement for. And additionally, you can go in and you can print this expense report to sign it and submit it for repayment of those expenses. So a very simple process. You just need to make sure that you have your resources defined and then you add those expenses on the jobs. You make sure that the checkbox to reimburse resource is checked if the resource is going to be reimbursed for it, as well as making sure that it's the right resource that's being reimbursed for it. And then you go in and you process the expense report, and then go to the expense report screen to actually view the expense report itself. So very simple. If there's any questions that you have on this, you can always email questions@serviceledger.com, and we'll be happy to answer any specific questions on expense reporting or job expenses for you.